Hi everyone, and welcome to an episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the recruitment director here at Trident, and today we're joined with Gert-Jan, the co-founder at FalconForce. Gert-Jan, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Gert-Jan, I've wanted to get you on for so long because I've been following the FalconForce journey since basically throughout COVID and since the new year. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your background? And I suppose, how did you get to where you are now?
Thank you, man. So, since the beginning of this year, co-founded, as you already mentioned, the company called FalconForce, specializing in both offensive and defensive services. Within the team, I'm responsible for doing defensive work. We have both offensive and defensive specialists, and I'm one of the two defensive specialists. Mm-hmm. And in that extent, I'm focusing on cyber threat intelligence work, security operations, and delivering strategic change to companies. Before that, I worked at a Big Four company leading the CTI initiative, developing that, building a community around that across the globe, delivering TI engagements, but also just delivering projects and programs, anything we can do on the security aspect. And before that, way before that, I was focusing on security engineering, delivering security solutions for various clients in the Netherlands. And that's basically how the journey started.
Yeah, I did forget to say you are a Dutch-based company and you are based in the Netherlands yourself, right? Yeah, just to make it clear.
Yeah, exactly. So we're operating across the globe with different clients across EMEA, everywhere basically. But the reality is we're a Dutch company.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us, FalconForce. I've never seen a company co-founded by 8 specialists. Tell me what's the dynamic? What are the services you guys offer?
To tell a bit about maybe that's interesting for your listeners is first of all we started with 8. We are still with 8. And the rationale was because we had 8 persons who had the same motivation, to develop something cool, to develop something new, and do that in their particular niche. And with that, we found each other. And what was cool is that when we brought all these specialists together, we actually have a pretty cool, basically offering what we could bring to the market. Highly skilled people, all have 10 plus years in experience. Have their unique domains to work on, and that basically became the premise of FalconForce and what we do today, and also something that what we have as a vision, the combination of the offensive and the defensive brands to deliver clients exactly that, because that's what we see asking in the market. People who understand offensive capabilities, but also are able to then translate that into defensive actions. Yeah. So that's basically the premise of FalconForce.
Nice. So we both set up businesses in 2020. I wouldn't recommend setting up a business in 2020 if I had in hindsight, right? It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Talk us through the journey. Talk us the trials and tribulations of setting up a cyber consultancy in COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. So. I think there's a lot you can relate to, but I think the essence is when you start any company, you will never ever think about that a global pandemic is going to happen, right? So I think nobody was preparing for that. Although some people have been saying this for years, but I think in reality, when you start a company, you do that because you have a motivation to do something and to basically put a dent in the universe. And that's basically also our ambition. And the reality was that at the beginning of this year, we basically we had our ideas, we had our philosophy, and we just went on with that. And by doing so, we obviously, COVID has obviously impacted us. And in a sense, it has impacted us because as a company, you want to engage with people, both from a commercial perspective, but also from a delivery perspective. And that has been a challenge for us, but also for everyone, right? But what we also found is that by having these restrictions, if you will, you also get to think about what is it you want to do and what is it you want to bring. So what is the actual value you bring? What is the one thing you do that you want to be known for? And that helped us a lot, COVID, in a sense, to get really close to what is the essence of what FalconForce is trying to bring to the market.
Yeah, I think it's also super rewarding, right? If you can build a business in COVID and be successful and get into the new year, have a drink and celebrate and look back of what you've built, I think it's quite satisfying. And if you could do it during COVID, then my God, you could do it anytime, right? It's
Definitely,
and it forces you to be innovative, right? To go, what does the market need? It doesn't need another cyber consultancy that's going to offer X, Y, Z and everything, or do we go deep dive, narrow and niche and go, we are actually experts in this, and there's a reason why we've offered both blue and red team, basically, right?
Exactly.
And how they complement each other.
Exactly. And what I think is really cool is, and we're not the only one, right? I mean, there's a lot of companies that have started this year. I mean, 2020 is also the year of new found companies. We also see that in the Netherlands. Shout out, by the way, to all the new startups. But the reality is that all of these companies have their own challenges. And I think, one thing that COVID has taught us all is to be creative and just to stick to your plan and try to develop that. And if things don't work, throw them out the window. If you can't do consultancy, for example, for us, try and innovate and build yourself a service around that's something you do. And that's what we've been doing to continue to try to push that initiative. And we think that's, by the way, we think that's pretty cool because we on the one hand do our thing, and on the other hand we get to use the data we collect from that to develop new cool stuff. Yeah. So obviously I'm the glass is half full kind of guy.
Yeah, certainly an optimist. Have you found there's been a challenge with regards to, in let's say, more of a normality, you would be all together in an office? I don't know if you have been or if you've had that opportunity, but we've certainly found at Trident that we enjoy being around each other, bouncing ideas off each other, and it's just good for the culture, the atmosphere, and just being around people. It's very like-minded people. Have you managed to be together in an office, or is it all been over Zoom?
Yeah, definitely. So that's an interesting story as well. So obviously when you do a startup, you want to sit together, right? So at the beginning of this year, everyone was sitting in their own attic, like a true startup, right? But the reality was that at some point in time, we needed to sit together. So we fortunately have a lot of friends who gracefully, invited us to come over, sit in there. We actually once sat in a small, pediatrician office next to Schiphol. I mean, it was crazy, but it was really cool. And the fact that we did it like that was really cool. And then we actually started looking at, hey, maybe we should get, let's say, a small place where we can come together for those meetings. And then COVID came, so we actually rented a place and we sat there for like 2-3 weeks. And then actually we all needed to work from home. And that actually was a pretty interesting dynamic. And then you see us innovate, for example, we have a daily virtual call line open for everyone to join in and to see what everyone else is doing to communicate. And over the months, we actually got to access another space where we are now sitting together and where we have sufficient room for all of us to sit and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got to enjoy doing it at the same time, right? Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I find being together and I suppose in an office, it makes life easier. Of course it does. But one thing I found COVID has is founded out a lot of companies who have poor communication. So it's almost forced, I suppose, to bigger companies as well. It's a little bit, it might be tougher because they're a little bit more set in their ways. But if you're a small, agile organization, obviously startup, you don't get more agile than that. The way you communicate and the levels of communication, you can just keep spinning it in different ways and find what works. You don't have to. There's not one set way. So it's super important that you obviously have the right channels of communication as well. And even having too many channels of comms can also be a problem.
Definitely. And I'd like to add to that it's also dependent, obviously, on the team. But what we really found is that you really have to figure out, also coming back to your point on the 8 partners, you really have to figure out what does everyone prefer. Does one prefer to work from home more? Does one prefer to work from the office more? Do you want a verbose community or less, more to the point communication? And I think the single point that is at the core of that is respect for each other. If for example, one of your team members, Josh, wants to work from home and that's how that person works efficiently, then we'll just have to figure out how we can, combine that with another person who loves to work from the office and works together. And I think that's also something that COVID teaches us, is that you need to adapt. You need to adapt or die, and that's the reality of doing business in these times.
Yeah, totally. So let's dig deeper back into the services of FalconForce. So you said red and blue. Do you have a particular client that you work with, or like a sector, or is it size of company, or what? Do you offer both services at the same time? Talk us more about, so people that are listening, let's understand you guys a little bit more.
Yeah. So obviously we have both offensive services and defensive services, and we do loads of other stuff. And let's start with the other stuff first. So we basically give trainings, develop managed services, and we also do other cool specialist projects. For example, testing specific crypto aspects, or maybe even developing our own cyber range for testing and training purposes. All sorts of cool stuff in that area. Now, if we look a bit deeper into our offensive and defensive capability, we obviously are a boutique consultancy firm. So we have 8 people who are all skilled in what they do, in both offensive and defensive. And we focus on the testing aspect, which considers security testing, pen testing, but also, and that's more of our expertise, is the red teaming aspect. But also to develop your own capability in that extent. And now the defensive aspect focuses more on security operations team. So how can you actually improve your security operations team in both threat hunting, CTI, on all sorts of levels. And obviously we deliver consultancy on that, but also managed service. So to give 2 examples, so what we basically, the premise of FalconForce is we deliver consultancy, and our clients come back to us and say, hey, this is something we need. And then we develop that. And as part of that, we, for example, develop 2 specific services, one focusing on vulnerability intelligence, and the second one focusing on continuous testing of defensive controls. Because our clients are asking for that, and we have the expertise and the knowledge to build something around that. And then we just deliver that and work together with our clients, who are the biggest clients in the Netherlands. But not just that, we also work with small, medium enterprises, because we strongly believe that the expertise we have of delivering those complex and sophisticated tests and developing these capabilities, there are lessons in that. And to give a small example of that, we're, for example, now working with a regional initiative focusing on increasing the digital resilience of the high-tech manufacturing scene in a particular region in the Netherlands. And that's because we believe that is one of the initiatives how you can give high-end testing expertise back to the community.
Yeah, nice. And I think you have 8 highly skilled specialists, right, in their own fields, but then you're also super agile. So if a company does come to you and say, I like what you do, but can you also do that? You basically go away, almost like a think tank, and put ideas together and go, can we deliver it? Yeah, cool. Let's come up with a product or a service and let's get it done. And you just keep evolving all the time. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool.
Absolutely. That is exactly what we try to do. And I think, what the current security market is doing is developing what they think is cool, which is to an extent true. Yeah. But what I'm less seeing, and that's also coming back to my security engineering background, is what I'm less seeing is what is the exact problem the clients are facing, for example. And that, for example, was one of the reasons why we, for example, started helping people with vulnerability intelligence, because they were sick and tired of getting thousands of emails every day to see what the problem was, and they just wanted to have 1 or 2, right? Mm-hmm. And that is exactly the type of problems that FalconForce is trying to overcome for our clients. Not just testing it, but also, developing something tangible for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, moving on. There's something I want to talk to you about that I know you're just as passionate about that I am as well. The CTI community. So, threat intel, the community, bringing people together, increasing knowledge, sharing ideas, and upskilling internally and externally, and also bringing more people into the industry, right? Because there is a huge demand for threat intel.
Yeah.
So, what's your take on that? What are you guys doing anything at the moment around the CTI community? Do you have any ideas or plans?
Yeah. So first of all, I think CTI in general is a community concept. So I think that it depends a lot on most of the time of people and understand and trying to liaise with your peers or maybe acquaintances or whatsoever. But in a sense, there's also the challenge of having closed circles. So the biggest challenge in CTI right now is breaking those closed circles and making it into a more shareable concept. In that extent, what we try to do is we're just trying to bootstrap the market with expertise. So, for example, giving back to the community threat hunting aspects. How can you detect attacker sequences based on something we actually see in the threat landscape, right? And that makes it extremely practical for an analyst at company X to grab that and have a conversation internally to build his own internal community. And the second thing, right, is that those persons ought to be, connecting with their peers, and we need to bring those together. And I'm not the one who brings those communities together. But I do believe that the CTI community is a strong one. You see that on social media. You see that on conferences, for example. And as a third and final comment on that, so in my I previously worked at a Big Four company where basically one of the key strategies we had, because we had low resources, and I actually think that a lot of companies who have CTI analysts aren't in the position to have a legions of analysts. So collaboration is just key, just having one person in the UK, one person in the US, one person in Argentina, It's about scalability. And if you, for example, need someone who needs to investigate a particular bit of malware, then you need to know, okay, I need to call that person.
Yeah.
And I really recommend everyone to reach out to those individuals within your own company to build that internal community and also look outside to who that could be in the outside world.
I think it is getting better from what I speak to people and talk to people and hear and the events I go to. Different accredited bodies are promoting these events and circles of CTI specialists. Of course, it does depend on the sector you're working. You do have the ISACs, of course you do, and different sharing communities. But there are certain
and you have conferences and everything. I think there's a lot of initiatives to share. And technology is helpful as well. I mean, the people who've built the MIST platform, for example, lowered the bar drastically to make technology sharing accessible to everyone, basically. So a shout out to those people as well. But I think there's one thing on technical sharing, but we have still a long way to go as an industry to do that interpersonal sharing.
I think it's also down to competition. It's down to, if I'm at one of the Big Four, am I going to share the fact that I've just found something on a particular sector with another Big Four competition? You're probably not, are you? Just for one, scared of my own job being put at risk for doing so, and two, it's a revenue generating business, right? So there's an element of that.
Can I comment on that? So
Please,
I do have a controversial opinion on that. So I do think that whatever the legal restraints we have, I think there's always aspects we can share. And I think on the short term, yes, those discussions matter. But on the long run, I definitely see, for example, in a commercial sense, what we in the past saw is that by not sharing anything, we were not known. But once we were sharing, people also found us, for example, and know, okay, this is what you're up to. And I think not sharing that aspect is a short-term approach, where I personally prefer the long-term approach.
Yeah, I agree. Long-term strategic relationships, right? Because if you keep offering out advice or tips on what's going on and what you're seeing, it will come back around eventually. It will. I completely agree. So, okay, my final point, I want to talk to you especially about, because I know the blend of defensive and offensive team at FalconForce. What's the future of intelligence? What does it look like? How do you think it's going to be shaped into one way? People always talk about automation and reducing the noise and too much data coming in at me. I can't process it and make it actually intel, right, and actionable. What do you think?
Yeah, so obviously the essence of CTI is looking at incidents and digesting what comes out of that and translating that into actionable things you can do for your organization. That's obviously the definition is much broader, but that's the premise. But what I'm as a CTI person, what I'm missing is pushing the bar closer to what's happening right now. So what my premise is for FalconForce is looking at, we looked at incidents that have happened over the last, let's say, year, and we know that these aspects happen, and I respect that, but I also want to look at, so what are people doing right now? What are the red teams doing right now? What are the techniques they've been using? And can we, for example, correlate what the red teams are doing right now and translate that into and compare that to the intrusions we're seeing to basically reduce that detection gap, but also that response gap, that we know faster where we need to operate it. And I think in a sense that's one area where I see some potential improvements for the whole scene. And a second aspect of that is actually keep going with the testing aspect. I don't want to toot the automated testing horn, but I do think that both creatively testing through red teaming and adversary simulation, in a sense, simulating specific techniques in an environment, but second also to testing those specific scripts on a continuous basis in your organization. That helps you to develop, a better understanding of your security posture that goes way beyond CTI. And I think, in a sense, CTI is there to help you guide what is the adversary doing, and everything associated with that, specifically to your threat profile. And in a sense, that brings us also to how offensive and defensive comes together and form, if you will, the purple teaming concept.
I like you mentioned it right early on in this conversation about the continuously testing the defensive controls of an organization. It almost doesn't allow, let's say, the SOC to become comfortable and just sit there and wait. It's almost like, we're continuously testing from an external point of view, as if I was an adversary, and then I'm guessing you suggest areas of remediation, right, and what they need to do and tighter controls, and these are your vulnerabilities and stuff. But continuously testing that, I don't think it's done enough. There obviously are reasons why. It's expensive, it's resource intensive, but it does allow for companies to almost be at ease knowing that they're continuously improving, I suppose, and you can't rest on your laurels.
Yeah, and I think every SOC we come into, these people know what they're doing, they know what their mission is, they know how they can they know how to respond to what is coming their way, and everyone needs to help them to help do the priority the priority tasking, for example, and one aspect of that could be testing. But for example, I'm seeing it really simple. You have an analyst has a lot of work he or she needs to do every day. How can we make that life easier? How can we help that person prioritize more? And I really feel, and that's on a technical level, but I also feel that in a sense, the future of CTI is also on the strategic level. CTI does contribute to strategic decision making because it tells you where basically the ball is going, not where the ball is right now. And I think that is something that decision makers need to take into account. because you can't deploy specific security solutions within 1 week. That takes months. So that understanding, that's also a thing that is the future of CTI, in my opinion.
Nice, awesome. So one final question, which I don't let anybody go without asking this question. Gert-Jan, if you were not in cybersecurity, what would you be doing?
Okay, I love that question, by the way.
Keep it clean.
So from origin, I'm a techie, so I love technology, but I'm also, I actually started my education in multimedia at the time when the Apple computers were basically those pink and green blobs, And we were doing Photoshop way back. It has always... That has always intrigued me, the creative aspect. I love creativity. I love developing marketing aspects, and that's what I'm also doing for FalconForce as well. But if I wasn't in IT, specifically in security, then I would be looking at, how can we develop larger concepts for companies in terms of how they build their brands. I love that, looking at the bigger picture. That is something I do, and that is something I love to do, and whatever it is.
Nice. Are you heavily involved in the FalconForce kind of branding, digital marketing, or is that because all 8 of you must have different strings to your bow, right? Not just technical, but personal software.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And everybody has to play their part in what they exactly do. And I'm, for example, mostly responsible of doing that little aspect. And I think that's really cool, because this allows me also to basically, you asked me what I wouldn't be doing if I was doing this. So I can combine those two together, and I love that. And I love my job. I love what I'm doing content-wise. So I'm pretty happy, man.
Epic. That's brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. I've loved listening to the story, the journey, the services you guys offer. And just also trying to build that, and trying to build the community, and trying to improve sharing, and just learning from each other and bouncing ideas off. And it doesn't, just because you work for a competitor bank, for example, it doesn't mean you can't pick up the phone to an old colleague and say, hey, we've got this issue, or I've seen something, heads up guys, it might be coming your way. Like it was one common goal, right? Which is fighting the adversary. So
exactly. Any way we can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the invitation as well, and I'm really happy to be here, and I love what you're doing with Trident Search, and I'm really pleased to see that the people you have on board, very knowledgeable people, which I have a lot of respect for. So I'm happy and honored to be among that list.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. Take care.